Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marty Cook, and I'm here with Joe Villa in his home studio, and we're all set to bring you a presentation today on champagne. Joe just left.
I'm here.
He's here.
I'm here.
He's here.
I'm coming back.
And I should preface the rest of my remarks by saying the best of the holidays to everybody. This is our last virtual presentation of this year, of this calendar year. And we'll see you in 2022. But in the meantime, you can also visit our website at pawinesociety.org and catch the recorded versions of these episodes, which we're about 75% of the way through hanging them up, posting them for those of you who are members. And in the meantime, this episode, it is my intention that we'll have it posted sometime in the next 24 hours. So having said that, and we still have people coming to the room, we also have some special guests today. There may be some people from the Orange County Wine Society, but there are also a number of people from the IEEE organization. And we hope that you folks enjoy this presentation and come back for future ones, and maybe even consider joining the Pennsylvania Wine Society. Let me advance it to the
click anywhere outside of that.
Okay, so one thing I need to point out too is that this is being recorded. You could figure that out by my previous remarks. And if you have an aversion to that, this would be a good time for you to leave. Otherwise, your attendance will signify your approval of this episode being recorded. Having said that, I'm going to turn everything over to Joe Villa, who's going to lead us through a rather extensive history of champagne. We're going to be tasting 3 champagnes today. I hope you have them ready at the ready and possibly even open, because we are going to taste as we go. So Joe, you're on.
Oh, I'm on. Hey, how you doing, everyone? Good to see you. We're going to be doing champagne today, as you know. We did send some things out. Hopefully you had an opportunity to open some of these. Unfortunately, I just sent some of these out last minute, and I believe Lynn had just sent some of these today. What you're looking at on the screen there right now is Champagne from Terroir to Wine. Is really the booklet or the information. If you got that email, if you can open it, if you can print it, even go to their site and just look at it. Pretty much everything I did in this seminar, if you will, or this tasting, is based out of this booklet.
One moment, because I do want to turn on the recording. Do you see where that is here? Resume, pause recording. I guess we must be recording. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought we had paused.
And back to this booklet. What I have here is a hard copy from the Champagne folks, which actually I love it because it breaks everything A to Z down with all the maps, all the law. And again, if we were sometime down the road, if we do an in-person tasting, I'll get a quantity of these that we can hand out. In the meantime, please visit the website and check that out. So
let me just eliminate this.
That.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. Put that there. Actually, maybe put it.
Yeah, we have quite a bit of information here today, guys, to go through. Normally this is, and I'm going to say we're going to go easily an hour and a half. There's a lot of information concerning champagne. I had to cherry pick, and again, the information that we're going to cover. I'm not expecting to make you an expert in champagne, but I'm hoping to point out some things, make you more aware. Again, rooting back to the 3 wines we selected today to taste. As Marty said, don't be afraid to open your wines. The tasting order that we have The Delespierre Brut is the one that we're starting with. That's what we have in our glass. But we'll talk about those wines pretty much specifically at the end because there's a lot of information to cover. So let's get this party started. Now, you know how I work. I like to kind of point out in the world, at least where we're at in that world of geography. We are in France, and in this case, more specifically, up in northern France. And we will talk over and over about how this region is the coldest region in France. Up in the north, it actually rides the borderline of where you can get grapes ripe. Again, back to the booklet that was sent out. Just today, it has these 3 maps in there, and we're going to talk about these. Are built into the presentation. These 3 maps specifically are of the Champagne region, and the overlay pretty much showing the region where the grape varieties are grown and the soil types. I point this out because, you know, we look at wine regions, they kind of tend to put wine regions as a whole, like a big circle on the map or a big square. And maybe the region as a whole is that. But when it comes to grape growing here in Champagne, where you see those colors, that's where the vineyards are. Those are the actual designated areas, even though the area as a broad as a whole on a big map looks broader, it gets way more specific than that. And everything in Champagne is terroir driven, terroir being the earth, the surroundings. It cannot be duplicated anywhere in the world. So what makes Champagne, you know, sparkling wines and Champagne kind of go in the same bucket, if you will. They're all sparkling, but there are differences here. You know, all the different sparkling wine types, Champagne, Cremant, Cava, Prosecco, Sect, these are all your sparkling wine types, if you will. 10% of all wine types produced in the world are those types, or sparkling wine. Champagne makes up 10% of all sparkling wine produced. Champagne makes 1% of the still wines produced. So up top there, where it says 10% of all wines produced in the world, that doesn't take in sparkling. That's all wine. That's all put together. So is only a small portion, is the point I'm trying to make here. And over, I'm going to stress where Champagne can only come from the Champagne region of France. When I say Champagne, guys, over and over, too many times I think people with thinking synonymously, thinking Champagne is a sparkling wine. It is, but we often want to identify all sparkling wine as a Champagne. That drives me absolutely nutty crazy. You know, to see California Champagne on the same label, my mind wants to just explode, simply because you can't have it. It's an oxymoron if you just understand Champagne as a place. Champagne is, 150 kilometers northeast of Paris. I did want to point this out. This is something new, and I say something new in the way that, Champagne is very proud of its origins, the grapes they grow, where it comes from, the name, and they don't like the fact that there's companies out there using Champagne on a label, and a lot of domestic California producers. They make sparkling wine, they may call it Champagne, but it indeed is not Champagne if it's not coming from Champagne. Point is, there are groups and organizations in the world that actually promote these areas and want to enforce those origins. And I just want to point out, in 2005, Champagne joined another group here trying to enforce these names. And here's just a list of 23 names in this group currently, and some that I like to point out that you cannot use. They, if California makes a Bordeaux blend, they can't use Bordeaux. Again, duplicating these names, using the word Chianti, using the word Champagne. Worse yet, using that word sherry. These are places, every one of these on the screen, people, these are all places and shouldn't be used by others to market their wine. For instance, years ago, Napa Valley, there used to be like the Napa Wine Company, or the Napa whatever. And because they're so Appalachian concerned here, now a lot of those names can't be tied in with branding. And that's what we're talking about here. Like if you see even Washington State on this list here, they're not going to, you will not see a champagne from Washington State. They call all their wines out there sparkling wines. So, and again, what this is just to get people to honor the areas and the wines where they come from. Why is champagne different from other sparkling wines? Again, can't harp enough because it comes from a very specific region. It comes from the Champagne region of France. Say it enough, Champagne only comes from Champagne, France. It's a place, unique traditional process. How they make this wine, we're going to cover all that as we go through this as well. How they make the wine is important. It's identified or called method champenois, again, or the traditional method. What makes it different here is their blending, their assemblage of the base wines. Those three grapes, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, are the only grapes allowed here in Champagne, and they are prestigious grapes. And I say prestigious in the way of they've done this now for 300-400 years in Champagne to narrow this down to these three grapes being the primary. You have a question?
Nope,
Okay,
not yet.
Oh man, okay, good. There is a long maturation of these wines in the cellar, and let me point out that if you're having any of these champagnes, or if you have any champagne, period, the champagne or the wine that you're having was fermented in that bottle, and we'll talk more about method champenois and the traditional method. But if you have champagne, it again was produced in the actual bottle that you opened. It was in the cellar. And the cellar, I have to point out, it's the climate here in northern France that allows pretty much for these wines to be produced. Real quick, let's take a quick taste. If you haven't, please open your wines because we're having the Bertrand de l'Espée, the first wine. Cheers, Martissimo.
Cheers, Joe.
The first wine, and I want to mention this, we're going to cover this more specifically. This is more a classic blend of champagne. This is Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, in more a traditional blend. What's up? Okay. Champagne. If you poured this, champagne should, in all sparkling wines, have the tiniest and the finest of bubbles. Meaning Prosecco, a little bit bigger bubble. Asti, Spumante, bubbles as big as my head. The bigger the bubble, the quicker they dissipate, and I want to say less finesse they have. The tinier the bubble, the more creamy the wine will be, the smoother it'll be. And this is tying in. This is perfect. It actually could be a little colder, but all right, let's get right back to this. Got to keep it flowing. Ooh, that is good. That is, now I have to talk about the wine a little bit. It has just like a perfect balance. It has the citrus, it has the toasty flavors, and it is on the softer side. It's not coming across as acidic or sharp, I guess is what I maybe would have expected. But we have a couple more wines to hit here.
We have sun showing through the one glass over here that, and you can see the perlage as the bubbles rise in a straight chain.
That's a fancy word.
Ooh.
Yeah. Talking about champagne, though, is any of these wine growing areas, wars, when it brought repeated destruction to this area. On your maps, if you see the maps of Champagne, there are two primary cities in Champagne, Reims and Epernay. And Reims here was destroyed 7 times, and Epernay no less than 25 times by wars. In the Middle Ages, this area, the Champagne itself, was really a center for European trade. Textiles, clothing, cloth, that kind of thing. Wine really wasn't the primary. It then became, as winemaking caught on, and then champagne eventually became the center or part of it. 987, the cathedral in Reims. This is almost a landmark. This might be one of the UNESCO landmark sites. It's a coronation site for French kings. Over 37 kings were crowned here between 816 and 1825. But let me just point out, at this point, still wines, non-sparkling wines, were really were held in the high regard. Sparkling wines were looked as like a flaw, a fault. What is this funky stuff? Why can't you make me some real wine? And it was really the monasteries that were pretty much behind the winemaking involved with royalty. Monasteries and the royalty kind of controlled the winemaking at this point. And I want to say that was pretty much serious all the way up until the French Revolution, late 1700s.
1789.
1700s, sparkling champagne. When we talk about the area here, again, sparkling, when we say champagne as a wine or as an area, they were making wine. Only 10% of that was sparkling in the 1700s, just to give you an idea. Most of it was all table wine. And again, as it started to be caught, as things started to catch on with the royalty, I love this little quote: the lubricant of preference at aristocratic gatherings. And you know how this works. As things start to catch on the upper things, as in upper class, and things start to roll down. But I don't know that everyone could even afford it, because again, how much of this wine was even made. Popularity started to grow. 1728, Louis XV allowed the transport of wine in bottles. This is critical because prior to that, wine was all transported in barrels. And everything being controlled by the king, it wouldn't have been allowed. And at this point, bottles, wine or champagne, were the first bottles allowed here in France. Kind of a key date here, because it's 1728 when he allowed that. In 1729, Ruinart, who was very much involved in the champagne process, we'll talk a little bit more about that, jumped on that and became the first recorded champagne house, meaning there were a couple making wine at this point, but Ruinart, that's our rosé we're having today, he jumped on that fact that the king started allowing the bottle production. And it was a few years, I think it's 1735, I think their first vintage went out. 1735, royal ordinance actually instituted to dictate bottle size, the shape, the weight, cork size, and then all being secured with a pack thread to the collar. Someone else trying to get in here?
Yeah, if you could leave them in, there you go.
And then 1743, I want to throw this in, Claude Monet founded the House of Moet, which is the largest champagne house today. Now, I said Claude Moet or Claude Moet. 6 of one, half dozen of another. I've heard the name pronounced both ways. And if you know the name Moet and Chandon, those are the owners also of Dom Perignon. You can move that to the right. Okay, you do that. Yeah, do that if you would, because everything, if you put it over here, that'd be perfect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and we can't talk champagne and history without mentioning Dom Perignon. Does anyone know what a Dom is?
That was my question.
Yeah, it's actually just an old name that actually refers to dominant. And it was given to, back in this time, usually these Benedictine monks that were in charge of something. So, but it all roots back to dominant, the person in charge, if you will. And Dom, his name Pierre Perignon, Dom later on, was a Benedictine monk. He lived 1638 to 1715. Important guy here because of what he did to bring what he brought to the table with champagne. 1688, appointed treasurer at the Abbey of Hautevillers, located near Epernay. Now, this is Dom Perignon, the person. His duties included cellar management and winemaking. Shortly after, discovered in his winemaking that these bubbles kept appearing in the wine, but it was a natural process. It just kept happening over and over. But it's because Champagne's cold climate and their short growing season, grapes are generally picked later in the year due to ripeness. There's not enough time for the yeast on the grape skins to convert to sugar. Think of the basic formula for making wine. Yeast plus sugar gives us alcohol and carbon dioxide. So in this case, the yeast didn't have enough time to convert that sugar. The cold temps temporarily stopped the fermentation process. So the wines kind of go into a dormancy. And then when it gets warm in the spring, fermentation would start up again. But this time the wines were already in the bottle and they couldn't figure out what was going on here. So, and again, as I say, then it was that re-fermentation. The CO2 was then captured in the bottle. It wasn't always a good thing because it took a lot of perfection to get where we're at here today. Again, at that time, sparkling wine really wasn't the desired product. It was really a sign of poor winemaking. They were trying to make still wines. Really, they looked at it as unstable wine, developed art of, now this is all Dom Perignon. Dom Perignon helped develop the art of blending some of the different grapes, kind of embraced, if you will, the fact that he couldn't really get this bubble thing under control. So why not embrace what you have? Started blending the same grapes, maybe from different vineyards. Also developed the method to press the black grapes into white or for white juice. I say the black grapes. Remember, there are 3 grapes. We'll talk more about this. Chardonnay is your only white grape here in Champagne. Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier are your red grapes or your black grapes. And look at most of your champagnes are white wines. The white wine, the very first wine we're having, is predominantly red grapes, but it's a white wine. Again, that method to get that wine out as white and not get the color. Improved the clarification techniques, produced a brighter wine. And what we're looking at here in some of our wines are really, I call that bright. It's clean. I can't imagine, without these techniques, and we'll go through all this, where this wine, what this would look like. He also started using stronger bottles developed by the English. At this time, bottled glass wasn't the very best. And as pressures would build up in the bottles would explode. Also helped develop new bottle closures, cork, instead of, because at one point what they would use is wood and oil-soaked hemp as the stoppers. So at this point, cork was also introduced. So if you look at all these little things right here, just on this screen alone, are some of the things that Dom Perignon himself was involved in developing Champagne before it really kind of got in our hands here. Well, even before it started getting marketed out there. I do want to mention the different size bottles of Champagne. This is one of the weirdest, oddest categories that they actually market and sell these wines, all the way from 187s or splits. You see them out there in 4-packs, all the way up to, what is it? The Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I have, I think I have a Methuselah. I think this is a 6-liter Methuselah. You want to share this one with me, guys? Hey, yeah, it's empty. Don't get too excited. Yeah. It's all for the show. Anyway, his big bottles are great though. Just going back to some of these dates, and I'm going to mention some things here. Do you need that?
I'm just going to move that for you.
Okay. Degorgement, don't sweat this. We're going to cover this. 1813, degorgement was first practiced. So over here. So there we go. But in 1818, this process of degorgement or disgorgement was perfected by the widow, Madame Clicquot, Ponsardin's cellar master. Now, who I mean by that is Veuve Clicquot, the widow Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot, another big name in the process of winemaking or champagne production here. Also helped develop the riddling process. We'll cover all these things, guys. These are just highlights and names of big producers that had their hand in the making. Just keep in mind, champagne isn't that old. We're talking champagne. We're really only talking the last 300-400 years of its development. So in the 1820s, 1830s, the use of corking machines and wine muzzles. The wine muzzles are those wire things that come down over top to hold that cork pretty much in place. 1836, instrument to measure sugar in wine was developed, was created. Real important stuff, because when you need to measure the addition of sugar in fermentations, especially a second fermentation in champagne, it's very important, because how much sugar you add back to it may determine how much pressure is in that bottle. So with that, if they could measure the sugar, guess what? Now the bottle burst rates drops down to 5%. Yeah, bottles were popping in the cellars at this time left and right. If it would warm up to any warm temperature, it was like very unstable, and these bottles could blow. 1800s, sparkling wine industry was definitely well established, but by 1914, World War I hit, and we now come full circle with war again. So I'm just pointing out this war thing over and over, because every time that occurs, these vineyards are all ripped up, and we start the industry pretty much all over again. So, and those two world wars, pretty much, I want to say, especially the First World War, was the last major effect in France and Champagne. 1936, Champagne as an AOC was established. AOC, Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée. What that means is the place of origin, where it comes from. France was, one of the first places to start doing this in their wine regions back in the 30s. Again, pre-World War II, to establish their wine regions, and again, for the most important reason, so that they're not duplicated by anyone else out there. Again, they revised that law in 41, and then at that time, they created this committee. And I have to mention this: the Committee Interprofessionnel du Vin de Champagne, CIVC. These are the folks that, because of them, are why I believe Champagne is what it is today. They're the ones that have pounded it into our heads that Champagne is a place. It's a place. It's a place. It's a place. And they are behind that completely. And this organization now runs the whole production of Champagne. That whole region is run by this organization, A to Z. Nothing flies pretty much without their involvement. And again, trying to protect the method, the grape varieties, the region, the name. Defenders of the use term champagne. But guess what? There's some out there that don't use it. US and Australia. Yeah, that's my hair on fire. It makes me go crazy when I see California champagne. There is no such thing as California champagne. You see that label, right? There's no such thing as California champagne, but guess what? They're out there on the shelves, and until California as a state decides to make that go, where I said I think Washington has recognized they will not use champagne, Oregon will not use champagne, Texas will not use champagne. Certain states have in this country recognized and said we won't use champagne. Well, guess what? If they want to sell Washington wine in Europe, that's probably a good thing. So it works hand in hand. If we want to honor theirs so that we can actually sell our wine there as well. So, and if you think of, I think spoke of Walla Walla and some of these areas out there in the Northwest, they're trying to get their own identity in the same regard, and they don't really want anyone else, tapping into that uniqueness. European Union awarded this group the Champenois, the monopoly term, method Champenois. I have to point this out because I think it was 2015. It's fairly recent. Years ago, you could buy sparkling wine made here in this country, out in California. They would use that term, method Champenois. Spanish cava, I think, would use method Champenois. No more. That now they have to use the term traditional method. Method Champenois, even that is now only to be used by the Champagne folks. So, again, not just production of wine. When it comes to these legal battles, there's been quite a bit. Yves Saint Laurent ordered by the courts to cease using champagne perfume. So anything with the word champagne and being misused in that regard, just to give you an example, and I'm in full agreement of it, but just beware, there's certain places out there, new world countries, that are Corbel not really bending with it. So yeah, I think there's Corbel, there's Andre, there's Cooks, there's, there's a number of domestic producers that throw champagne on that label. But you get what you pay for, guys. Please remember that as well. Got to do it. Got to take a small break here. Got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to just take a little sip here. Bear with me. Oh well. Oh, okay. I like that, sir.
Sort of like how Jackie Gleason used to have that cup of whatever on stage.
Well, keeps us motivated.
Yes.
The terroir, where we're at here in Champagne, roughly 34,000 hectares or 84,000 acres of vineyards. As I said earlier, 93 miles east of Paris. In Champagne, there are 319 villages or crews in 5 departments. And I say crews, when we talk about crew, our second wine we're going to have is actually one of those crews, one of those villages, and is actually a grand cru. We'll get into that because, I want to taste that one. The climate here, the region is your most northernmost region, and it really does push the limits of vine cultivation. Now, that being said, I've always said that, I've always taught that, but in the past couple years, guys, temperatures have been a little warmer, even here in Champagne. So just keep that in mind. Now, this past season, I think we did have some hail, I think, over the summer in Champagne. So this year's vintage was probably affected, if I had to guess, depending on where the hail fell specifically. When the hail comes down on a vineyard, you're done. That pretty much strips the vines, guys, of that vintage, and very little would be produced. But again, we're pretty high. We're very north, cool climate, and struggle some years to get the grapes right. But I want to stress, in the past couple of years, it's really been not such a struggle. Here in Champagne, they just are distinguished really by a dual climate. They have really 2 effects: a continental climate from the south, which brings spring frost and your summer sunshine, and then coming from the west, you have an oceanic influence coming from the what is that?
The channel.
The channel. That's the English Channel. Thank you. Yeah, I get stumped here sometimes too. Which brings your regular rains and, of course, lower temperatures, giving it that perfect balance. It is a cooler temperature, though. Your average annual temps here are 51 degrees, and you know how that kind of translates to where we're at here. Average annual rainfall, 27 inches. I don't know, again, if you can put that into perspective. I think we get here in Pennsylvania maybe 40, probably in a good wet year, it could be more than that. Just keep it in perspective. As I mentioned, where we're at, I always point the wine growing bands. These darker bands are where, in theory, you can grow grapes in the world. So, where we're at is, up there again, at the top of that arrow, is pushing the limit of the northern tier, cooler climate. I throw this in there just again, kind of reinforce some of those temperatures and letting you know that it is indeed the northernmost climate, the coolest part of France. I keep pointing out these maps, and they are in the books, in that book that was sent out today, the PDF that was sent out today. I love these maps. Can't harp enough, because this will show you the Champagne region. And not just the region. Remember, it's not just a big circle, it's not a big square. It's really little plots of land in that area. And it's these little plots of land, then, how they are identified for grape growing. But we have 4 main grape areas of terroir here in Champagne: the Montagne de Reims. And that is, the Montagne de Reims is, I want to say, it's really important for Pinot Noir. And I think our first and last wine, I think the Pinot Noir, comes from Montagne de Reims. Our second region, the Côte de Blanc and the Côte de Sézanne. Côte de Blanc, as it says, Blanc, is known for white wine, Blanc, white. and that's where Chardonnay would come from. Our second wine we're actually having today comes from the Côte de Blanc and a single village or vineyard within the Côte de Blanc. Vallée de Marne, and that's kind of a mixture out there of Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Côte de Bar, also Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir. 15,000 vine growers. Within all of this, there are 319 total villages or crus. 17 of them are grand crus. And this, with that opportunity, or with this, guys, let's take an opportunity to try I'm going to try the second wine, which actually is a grand cru. This is 100% Chardonnay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we get to it, but I can't wait.
Cheers, Joe.
Yeah, if Lynn and company are out there, I'm with you. Can't wait for that, you know, so. That's a different animal. That's more my style. That's 100% Chardonnay. We'll talk about that. There are 44 Premier crus. The first wine that we had actually was made up or constructed of several very nice Premier crus. And then there's 258 other areas. And consider that when you see cheap champagne out there, guys, and I say cheap champagne, it should raise an eyebrow because, again, you only get what you pay for in most cases. I think what I picked out here, even at these price ranges at $39.99, are inexpensive for champagne, but it's hard to find them any cheaper than this without suffering quality. Keep that in mind. There's nearly 280,000 plots of vines. And each plot is roughly 12 acres. So again, when we look at a map, it's not one big circle, one big square. It's very specific within those areas, and especially Champagne. They've narrowed it down now. Here you can see just in this area, up in the top there, where the Montagne de Reims is, where your Grand Crus and your Premier Cru, and then all the others would be. It pretty much like a bullseye. At the center of the bullseye is where your Grand Crus, your better vineyards are going to be, and it kind of works its way outward from there in a broad way. Geography, 90 to 300 meters, great sunlight. Again, depending on the weather here, though. Slopes face south, east, and southeast. Soil is predominantly chalk. And I have to emphasize, your better vineyards, like the Chardonnay we're having right now, this Chardonnay is coming from a chalk-laden soil. Although you have marl, you have limestone, there's other things out there. And again, when they're making up this appellation and determining these vineyards, it's boiling down to where these soil types specifically are, and then the surroundings as well of the vineyards. You know, it's appellation is what it boils down to. Chalk acts as a natural water and thermal regulator, great for vine growing. Moderately steep terrain, and again provides good drainage. Chalk, this soil will hold water, so even in a dry year, these vines are still going to drill and find that water and survive. Back to more of my maps. This is one of those maps that, again, just takes that same Champagne region and now overlays those soil types as I was talking about. So just looking at the top on the map on the left, if you see Montagne de Reims, I'm going to keep focusing on that area. Look at the blue area, and you see what I'm talking about. Little like semicircle blue area, Montagne de Reims, is your chalk area. And when you see chalk, I want you to think probably primarily Chardonnay. And again, this is going to vary depending on the soil.
Which sort of overlays where the Cru and Grand Cru.
Exactly. If you look at those, exactly, Marty, if you look at those soil types, if we could overlay those maps, you would see those Grand Cru vineyards being right there in those better soil types. Absolutely. Back to the bullseye. The grapes allowed here, Pinot Noir. Today they say it's the #1 planted or produced grape at 39%. Back in my day, Pinot Meunier was the #1 planted grape. But Pinot Noir is black skin, white juice, as we know, adds structure, character, vinosity, love that word, spiciness, and aromas of red fruit. Pinot Meunier makes up 33%. as I said, depending on the numbers and who's providing the information, that might vary. It used to be Pinot Meunier is the number one, but it too has a black skin, produces white juice, more supple, round, fleshy, and aromas of white flesh fruit. Pinot Meunier is a little bit softer. It doesn't have the structure. Pinot Meunier, I've had 100% Pinot Meunier champagnes, and they tend to be just that little, maybe a little, or have that fruit, a little softer, certainly not ageable. It takes away from any ageable factor. Chardonnay, 28%, green to yellow skin, again, white juice, very fresh, finesse, elegance, aromas of citrus, and white blossom. And again, if you're having the second wine with us, so far, I prefer this over the first one,
So
is 100% Chardonnay. And there again, it has that nice little toastiness, that yeastiness. It's fresh. I'm not getting any oxidation from that, which is a good thing.
So basically what you're saying is today's champagne is probably superior to back in the day, as you say,
I would think, simply because
just 40 years ago.
they've cleaned up a lot of these things, and now the ability for, I'm more trusting of buying a bottle of champagne on the shelf because of these processes. But here you, again, looking at the map, you can see where Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Noir, and again, if you look up here in the Montagne de Reims, it's going to be Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. In the Côte de Blanc, right in the center, the Blanc is white, is going to be pretty much all Chardonnay. If you're having this second champagne with us, it comes from that Côte de Blanc area in the center of that map, right in the heart of Chardonnay growing. The heart of Champagne, the heart of the Côte de Blanc. It's just the heart of everything. So this vineyard is actually, I just love it. So there's again just a blow up of that same map, just to give an idea between Reims and Epernay and the Côte de Blanc down there in the south. This is where our wine comes from that we're having right now. Don't want to break anyone's heart, but yes, if you've been in the wine world for any amount of time and studying Champagne, we've harped over and over, there are only 3 grapes allowed in Champagne, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, but we lied. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have to teach it simply like that, because if we get into telling you the full truth, it gets too complex. But yeah, there are actually 4 other varieties allowed in the making of Champagne. 2 of them I can explain and justify. And that goes back to the original documents setting this up. When they wrote in for the grape varieties of Champagne, they simply put it as Pinot. They didn't put Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris. They just put it as Pinot. So when you see Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir, those are the choices they made. But in reality, Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc are indeed allowed because they are in that Pinot legal allowable family. The other 2, I think, Arbein and Petit Meslier, I think, are old and grandfathered in, and in many ways are, I think, field vines. I don't know how they can even account for some of these, simply because there's just such a small percentage, less than 0.3% of all plantings make up all 4 of those. So,
and the Pinot designation, those other Pinots are really mutations of Pinot Noir.
They are, and good point. And keep in mind where this is, Champagne is very northern. It's very cool. Alsace to the east in France. Remember, some of their primary grapes there can be Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, and their red of favor is Pinot Noir as well. So it's not uncommon. But when we say Champagne, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. Those are your primaries. Just got to tell you the rest of the story here, that there are 4 other grapes allowed.
But they represent a very small.
When I tested for my French exam, I had to know those 4 grapes, because yeah, that's the kind of silly stuff they want to know if you know. And yeah, so, but again, I don't know the importance, because I don't know that I've ever had any wine with those varieties in them. But the planting of the vines here. These vines are grafted, and we're not doing wine 101 here today, but there was such a thing back in the 1800s, phylloxera, which was a louse that was brought over by American vines to European vines, and it devastated all the vines. What they found was grafting their vines onto American vines would actually help. So my point is that all these vines are now grafted onto American rootstocks. They do high density planting, 10,000 plants per hectare. Ooh, Amazon. Optimizes the fruit quality. And here's just to give you an example, 1 square meter equals 1 vine. And then that 1 vine kind of equates 1 bottle of wine. So harvesting in Champagne is entirely manual. Have to pick everything by hand. No machines allowed. And that's a good thing because they are limited to what they can pick, how much they can pick, how much they can harvest. So they're only harvesting what they can use or what they feel they can use. Takes around 2 weeks. And at that point, over 100,000 people are coming out. Pickers, porters, loaders, press operators. The operation, it's in full swing when it happens. 5 basic principles in Champagne. Press grapes immediately after picking. This is for freshness. They use whole cluster processing, meaning they're out there clipping and cutting the whole clusters off, packing them, bringing them in, and pressing them as such. They use a gentle, gradual pressure increase. It's very, very slow. They don't want to just puncture and punch things here. It's a very slow pressure. We want that low juice extraction. Actually, they'll fraction, a fractionation of the juice. They'll break it up. The first part of that press is going to be the cuvee, and that cuvee is going to be your best juice. And the harder they press, then it will be the tails, and that's used for other things in blending and so forth. But that first pressing, the most gentle pressing, and especially in outstanding vintages, is where your Dom Perignons and those luxury cuvee champagnes will come from.
And that all has to do with the fact that the juice actually comes from different parts of the grape as more pressure is applied.
Yeah, it's actually the very best. It's the easiest. And well, I did send this out to the winemaking process. We're going to use this real quick, but when we're talking about these grapes and just to go through from the harvest, they're brought in immediately after picking, whole bunches, and we're bringing them in to press. And as I mentioned, they're broken down into the cuvee and the tail. Every one of these loads that are brought in are weighed and recorded. Everything is. These loads are actually identified as a mark. In Champagne, these loads are brought in. The press load of grapes is actually 4,000 kilograms or 8,800 pounds of grapes. And that's referred to as a mark. It's a unit of measurement. They're measured by the grape variety, by the vineyard that they were harvested, the destination, who's going to make the wine. We're going to talk about that. Guys, we have 3 different wines here today. If you have all 3 of these today, all 3 of these were made by different houses, if you will. Even though they're different producers, there's different, like one's a cooperative, the other's a big house. So who is getting the grapes? What is the destination? Who's going to be making that wine? Is it retained by the wine grower, sold to a champagne house? Our very first wine we had today is a wine grower champagne. The very last wine we have, Ruinart, is a champagne house. So, I say the small guy, and then you have the big guy. These grapes are all compliance tested, minimum alcohol by volume. They have to have a certain alcohol by volume. I told you this is cool wine growing country. So sometimes you can't get the alcohols or the sugars to where they need to be. Again, they're tested here by alcohol. Let's see here. Juice extraction is limited. And this is what I was saying earlier, that when it comes to harvest, if you have to limit, if you know you can only make so much wine, you're going to be picking what you feel is the only best, and you're going to only then process what you feel is the very best. Let's see, again, just keep harping on that first pressing of the juice is your cuvee, and the second is the tail. Each one of those is going to have specific characteristics. This is what you are alluding to. The cuvee is your purest juice. It's rich in sugar and acids. It's the wine that's going to make your sparkling wines with finesse and with that aging potential. The tails, acid content is lower, mineral content is higher. They're more aromatic and fruitier. Now, that being said, I don't want to beat anything up, but I know there's a champagne on the shelf in PLCB. I think it might have been a chairman's selection. And I'm forgetting the name of it. It begins with CH, Chevrolet or something. And I believe it was a chairman's selection, but never heard of it. It's actual champagne, but I don't know that it comes from a cuvee. I would imagine it was put together with these tails, if you will, and it's not as good. There are better champagnes out there. Just be cautious when you see a name you don't recognize, or if it has a shiny flower label, or again, if it's real cheap. Just be cautious, because again, champagne is about protecting quality and getting you the best product. Okay, question?
It appears that somebody has asked a question.
All right.
Made a comment. So Jerry
Jerry.
says, thinking about the first versus the second pressing, do they remove the pressed grapes from the first pressing, store them, and then bring them back for the second pressing, or do they keep it in the press? I think they keep them in the press.
It's in the
Jerry.
press. It's in the press. It's all a matter of separating that juice.
It's called press fractions, and it
Yeah.
has everything to do with the pressure that's applied.
Yeah.
And so the first almost free run would be the cuvee.
Yeah, exactly what Marty said. You think about just dumping grapes in there, just the weight of the grapes themselves may break the grapes and have free run juice. And then just apply a light pressure, that juice is going to be your very best. And again, by the time you're done, you're going to squeeze everything you can out of there, because the very last of what you squeeze out of there, I didn't mention it, is probably going off to a distillery. So yeah, it's in fractions, as Marty said. It's that first cut, though, I want to mention is what they're using for.
Yeah, the bitter end, where they really have to press, they literally get, bitter components, and it's not desirable. Are you looking for the cursor?
Mm-hmm.
That's always a mystery. So.
There we go. I just want to advance it. Okay. Yeah, presses range in capacity. Usually mechanical horizontal presses are used. They have a lateral membrane with angled pressing plates. This whole thing rotates. I have a picture next to show you. It's computer controlled. This is all pretty much automated. If you go to a winery today, you're probably going to see a mechanical, some sort of a horizontal press like this, and using that membrane. They used to use the vertical basket presses. This is what you used to see, putting grapes in something and cranking down something down on top of it. These were really standard until the late 80s. Still account for your old time producers, still use them 20%. There are traditional producers here that aren't willing to go into the new age, if you will. And, if they're small enough, they can do it. They don't have to, elevate and get all the big equipment and all that. So, sulfuring. Oh, dare I say, like I mentioned, additional grape varieties. Boy, I don't want to break anyone's heart, but these are things that in the wine world, we have to talk about it. Yes, they do sulfur in champagne. Once the juice is extracted, it flows into open tanks. Yes, the juice is treated with sulfur dioxides, SO2. So when you see that label out there, contains sulfites. So it's treated by sulfur dioxide, depending on the varietal condition of the grapes and the must in question, whether it be cuvee or tail. Now, I didn't identify must in question. Must is unfermented grape juice. So you're understanding where we're at here. It's just referring to that unfermented grape juice, the cuvee or the tail. Sulfites are used as a preservative. We've heard this over and over, but do you actually have reactions from sulfites? They do provide antiseptic properties. This is what keeps everything sterile and clean, and actually what keeps the ball rolling, if you will. Helps inhibit mold growth and unfriendly indigenous bacteria. Wineries are a funk basket. They can be nasty. I've been to wineries already that have been just so overladen with bacteria and molds and smells, and it will make you ill to smell some of these things. So again, if they're sulfuring and minimizing all that, I kind of get it. Otherwise, winemaking sometimes just can't happen. When we do sulfur, again, just mentioning that's your preservative. Wine pretty much is going to go into a big tank, and we're going to start a clarification process, removing the sediment, if you will, the cloudiness. And what this is called, clarification, is referred to as debarrage. Debarrage is settling of fresh pressed grape juice. And we're just letting that happen pretty much over a couple days. It's enzyme cloudiness. Think about that. When you're crushing up the grapes and you're mixing all this up, you're going to have sediment particles pretty much suspended in that juice and made up of grape skin, seeds, probably stems, whatever else is in there. It just has to settle out, which would be your first part of this clarification process. After 12 to 24 hours, the juice is drawn off, but we're going to start clarification at this point by fining, and we're going to talk a little bit more about fining. Musts at this point are transferred to the Cuvée. This is the room with that we will start fermenting it. With that, this is all just juice, and all we did was pretty much just let some of that sediment settle out, and this is just pretty much raw juice, unfermented. But now we do have to get that started. And remember, the first fermentation, alcoholic fermentation, the juice already has sugar, so now all we have to do is add yeast to that, and we will start the first fermentation naturally, converting that sugar to alcohol, and then as a byproduct will be CO2 or carbon dioxide. This is champagne, and champagne receives 2 fermentations. And look at that carbon dioxide. In this fermentation, the carbon dioxide will blow off, go into the air. All we're making right now is a still wine, a table wine, no sparkle. We want it bone dry and simple to the point. So we pick Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. We're pretty much making those grapes and wines individually. No blending is occurring. So when I pick my Chardonnay, I'm fermenting my Chardonnay right now. I'll ferment it probably in stainless steel, maybe a little barrel, probably all stainless steel. And I'm going to make that Chardonnay bone dry. And that's going to occur with Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Those are your only 3 allowable grapes. So let's just stay with that right now. Again, your first fermentation is done in the stainless steel vat under temperature control. Today we can do that in stainless steel. Remember, in fermentation, heat actually picks up. This way we can actually control that temperature, maintaining the fresh fruitiness. Some still ferment in oak barrels or concrete. Those are your old traditional champagne producers. Krug, for instance, I'm pretty sure still uses barrels for much of their Chardonnay. And it's that, again, when you buy a bottle of Krug champagne, the oak is most noticeable in that wine. The addition of selected yeast to the must. Yeast consume the sugar, alcohol, and carbon dioxide, and heat. Those are your products. Now, that being said, we created alcohol, and I told you this is a cold region. Sometimes they can't get the grapes ripe enough to achieve even the minimum alcohols. So guess what? I'm going to break your heart again. Here's another one of those terms or things that are done out there in the winemaking world that most people don't want to admit. It's called chaptalization. Chaptalization is the addition of sugar to raise the alcohol. Especially when you're in a colder region like Champagne, though I add sugar to that must so that we can get or reach a higher level. At this point, they do chaptalize just to reach a maximum of 11% alcohol in your champagne. Yes, the same wine you're having right now is only getting up to about 11% alcohol in this first fermentation, and they let that carbon dioxide blow off. Now, in that, I don't want to lay too much on you, but it's a fact. Now the wine is actually going to go through what they call malolactic fermentation. After that primary fermentation, malic acids are broken down into lactic acid. And what that does is softens the acidity. Otherwise, some of these wines might rip you in two. Remember, this is a very cool wine growing region. Malolactic is what that does is kind of throws the wine into balance. So it's just not too acidic, and then we can have some flavor as well. Winemakers generally favor malolactic, but some avoid it. And then some for the recipe, maybe only use it for part of their wine. So understand that it's one of those things that it's part of the recipe. And as we go through this, I want you to understand that every one of these champagnes that we're having, or every champagne maker, can make their wines differently based on all these different factors. And of course, then the wines are drawn off and clarified. Now, clarification. This is your final clarification, fining and filtering. What this does, it eliminates the lees or other impurities. Lees are the dead yeast cells. So when they do fermentation, you're always going to have that dead yeast in there. With this, they use fining or filtering. The first is fining. They use this clay, this Kieselguhr clay. I'm not positive. Maybe Laura can help me on that pronunciation then. And what's that?
Diatomaceous.
Yeah, that's another tongue twister for me. But these are all things that generally are used to help clarify the wine. When we get into basic winemaking, we can talk about egg whites and other animal parts, if you will.
Isinglass.
Yeah, here again, they're using, I want to think, more natural. And then, of course, filter pads. They can run this wine through a filtering system, and depending on the diameter or the thickness of the pad,
The micron.
it would strip depending how much you want to take out. You can make wine clear if you push it through enough filtering pads. Centrifuge is another way of clarifying. And once they get it clarified, now we're ready to take the wines and blend into a cuvee. And I say that because I want you to keep thinking about that. We could have a batch of Chardonnay that we've made now. We could have a batch of Pinot Noir. We could have a batch of Pinot Meunier. All three of these champagne grapes, all still wines. These are just table wines, but now they're ready to blend for our champagne. As I said, they're classified, though. These base wines are classified by the varietal because they're not blended at this point. They're all made individual, by varietal, by the vintage, by the vineyard, individual vineyard plot, possibly. The pressing fraction is absolutely has to be identified, as I said, between the cuvee or the tail. So when you start your blending, they're going to be looking at the cru, the vineyard, or the town that it comes from, the grape varieties that you want to blend, and or years you want to blend. Now, let me say this, champagne, we haven't talked about it, takes time. When we're talking about blending, they use wines from the current year if it's a non-vintage, but also they're using reserve wines from possibly the previous, it could be any number of years, previous years in the blend, and it's for consistency. If they use one vintage or 1 year, that would be a vintage wine. And again, it wouldn't be blended. It would just be from that vintage. There is an art here. It's called the assemblage. It's the art of blending varieties, origins, and years. So if you have things coming from Champagne, as I said, one region, keep in mind you might have 4 or 5 sub-regions within there to then pull your Chardonnay and Pinot Meunier from. And then within that, you could have vineyards that they're pulling from. Non-vintage wines. These are what we're having here today. It's the current year blended with reserve wines. It is not all 1 year. And again, they can do that for that reason, for consistency. Your bigger champagne houses, Moet and Chandon, Ruinart, they make pretty much what they call a house style. The wine you buy year after year, non-vintage, should pretty much taste just about the same because they're taking those different wines and blending for that reason. Vintage wine is only going to come from that 1 year. Vintage wines generally are a little more expensive, but very unique to that vintage, to that year. Rosé, we're going to have one here today. It's blending red still wine with white wine base. So if you take Chardonnay, and that's what Ruinart did, our rosé today, I think, is 80% Chardonnay. And I think they then took 20% still red wine, Pinot Noir, for our color, which is a good thing because that also gives us another wine for us to try stylistically. Blanc de Blanc, it's Chardonnay only. The second wine we had here today is a Blanc de Blanc Chardonnay. Blanc de Noir, this is a rarity in Champagne. Finding one labeled as Blanc de Noir would all just be made from Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier. But be careful, because if you see a Champagne Blanc de Noir, is it Meunier or Noir? As I told you, I've had 100% Pinot Meuniers. They don't have the structure as Pinot Noir. So just because it's Blanc de Noir, look at see if you can find the blend. Your reputable producers are going to tell you the information. And I want to stress that again. Our first wine we've had here today, the Bertrand Delespierre, if you roll that bottle around, it pretty much tells you everything you want to know on the back of the bottle and then some. And for this reason. So back to, it could leave single vineyard, single or one plot. Bottling. When we bottle the wine after the blending, this occurs after the first of the year. What we want to do here, once we put it in the bottle, now we're starting to think of getting our sparkle in the bottle. So we put the wine in the bottle. We're going to start our second fermentation. This is what they call the prise de mousse. It's capturing the sparkle. Remember that first fermentation, we let that CO2 blow off. We made a dry wine, but we don't have any sparkle in it. Now we took these wines, we blended them together, or it might be just one single wine. But now we're putting it in a bottle. We want to generate some bubbles. But remember the formula for making alcohol and CO2 is sugar and yeast. Add them, you're going to get your alcohol naturally, and then as a byproduct, carbon dioxide. So what we're going to do here is add a liqueur de tirage, a little sweet blend, a blend of a wine, sugar, and yeast, just a little bit. Once we put this wine in the bottle, we're going to add this little liqueur. Now we're going to seal the bottle with a crown cap. Crown cap's that old soda cap, you know, we used to take off, I did years ago, you know, with a crown cap, metal cap that pops on. It's a temporary cap. Once what we have here now is the wine in the bottle with that liqueur in there. Now we're going to transfer those bottles to the cellar, lay them down horizontally. This process can last up to 8 weeks, very slow to the low temperature because we're in Champagne. The yeast will start to consume the sugar, will start to release the carbon dioxide. Now we're in the bottle. It didn't dissipate. It now dissolves in the wine. It creates our sparkle naturally. Alcohol was at, what was it, 11%? Now our alcohol increases with that little bit, 1 to 1.5%, which will give us our 12 or 12.5 alcohol, which we see in the final bottling of our champagne. Okay. I know it's a lot, guys. I know it, but this really is kind of the formula and the process of how this works. Here's kind of a picture of, you know, that bottle with the crown cap and it having the yeast in there and how it can have that haze. And what we want to do is eventually that haze, that material, we want to capture it down in the neck of the bottle. The second fermentation, it takes place in the cellars, protected from sunlight. It's cool, constant temperature. Non-vintage wines take 15 months from the bottling date. Vintage wines take 3 years. So your vintage wines are going to be a little more hardy, if you will, a little more yeasty, and they're a little more expensive as well. Riddling. This is going in the process here. What we did by putting that mixture together and putting the crown cap on there and now laying the bottle over, we want to put it in the poopy tray. Yes, that's what you say. It's a poopy tray. It's the wooden A-frame shaped rack that these bottles will go in. And you'll see as a slow evolution, what happens is this bottle is laid over straight, and then by the time we're done, the bottle will be almost perpendicular, allowing that sediment to flow into the neck of the bottle. That A-frame rack you see there, that's small producers that might do it by hand. Some still do it manually. The Remure is the bottle turner. They can do up to 40,000 bottles a day. But you know how this works. You know, everything is mechanical today. The process is known as remuage. It's the natural clarification process. There's a picture of those sediments up in the neck of the bottle with that crown cap. As I said, what happens progressively, the bottles are tilted neck down. Bottles are moved, they're rotated in small increments to loosen that deposit, clockwise, anti-clockwise, and again, going from sideways, and then eventually, slowly, that bottle is going to be turned almost upside down so that sediment can fill into the neck of the bottle. As the angle of the tilt increases, gravity drives the sediment into the neck of the bottle. So you see the sediment there, guys. It's really a powdery thing. But now what? How do you get that out of there? So this process is all called riddling. As we said, it's the concentration of those lees in the neck of the bottle. I did mention that, you know, some do it by hand, but today it's pretty much automated. They use gyro pallets. It's all computer controlled. If you see the picture there, 504 bottles in one operation. That can last 3 days to 1 week. With really no expense to the quality of the wine. Depends on the cuvee they're making. If they're making Joe's average sparkling wine, it probably goes into one of those. If they're making Joe's reserve sparkling wine, it might be the manual method and go about 3 weeks, if you understand what I'm saying. I want to say the more unique, the more special the wine maybe would drive, and certainly the size of the operation would drive whether they use it or do it by hand or not. Your larger operations, Moet and Chandon and Veuve Clicquot, they're all using machines. Oh, where are we at here? Going too far, Marty. Yeah. Degorgement or disgorgement. It's the ejection of the sediments in that bottle. So again, how do we get them out? These dead yeast cells collect in the bottleneck. What we do is take that bottleneck and dip it into, if you can just imagine, refrigeration, a solution that would freeze that neck down to minus 18 degrees. And with that, when you freeze the neck of that bottle, you freeze the sediments. And what they do is they hold that bottleneck down. You don't want if they shake that bottle at all, the sediments will come right back up in the bottle. So it's very cautious and keeping that bottle facing down. They remove the cap. This is after freezing. Freeze the neck, hold the neck down, pop the cap, quickly tilt it back upward. The pressure inside there will naturally push that little sediment plug out. And guess what? Your wine is clean, your sediment is removed, and now you're ready for your next step. I think that is the neatest thing in the world to get rid of sediment in wine. And there's just a picture of them hand disgorging a Methuselah at Louis Roeder, you know, one of them big bottles. And as I said, it's usually the big bottles, small bottles, reserve bottlings that they'll do by hand. The 750s, your standard bottlings probably all go through a used machine. Disgorgement, as we said, it triggers a short, sharp intake of air when that plug comes out. Minimum loss of wine and pressure, only enough to take out that sediment plug. Mechanical units can disgorge 2,000 to 18,000 bottles an hour. And as I said, it's still used by hand today, but only for certain size bottles, reserve vintages, that kind of thing. And there's your, I don't know if that means anything, just a picture of the mechanical. Where's the people? Yeah, they don't need people. Moving on. So once we get that sediment plug out, now we want to fill that little space up in the bottle, if you will. Dosage. It's the addition of liqueur d'expédition. The final, it's the final step here in our wine. Dosage. It's the addition of sugar and wine mixture, liqueur de dosage, or expedition. Different types of liqueur you can have, and what it is pretty much just a sweet mixture. I want to say pretty much must that we're adding back to this already finished wine.
It can contain juice as well.
Yeah. And the sugar content varies according to style and dryness factor. Now, what I'm saying here is what we're doing is they're making this liqueur, this little sweet mixture. And we're going to be adding this back to our bottle of champagne. And what this will do is soften the wine and or compensate for any of the wine loss.
And this is a very proprietary thing.
It absolutely is, because when that, I told you this wine is already bone dry. Final sweetness in any champagne is determined here at dosage. Final champagne sweetness is added here. All champagnes up until this point, the wines are bone dry. So my point is, if you want a champagne that is very dry and no sugar, then you add less than 3. You won't add any sugar. Just naturally, there's going to be 3 grams of sugar per liter, and that's dosage 0. If you see anything out there, guys, ever labeled as brut 0 or 0 at all, that's referring to this dosage. They did not add any sugar to it. It's as dry can get. If you see the term natural, that also means 0. There is 0 sugar in there. Extra brut, just watch the numbers here. The term, as if you see it on the label, less than 6 grams of sugar are added, just to that little bit. So it's not really making it sweet at this point, but just enough just to offset, maybe for balance. How about brut? Probably the most common level that we see out there on our shelves. Brut, we say, is bone dry, but is it? Less than 12 grams of sugar per liter. So I got to stress, if you want serious bone dry champagne, you go to Brut Nature. This where we're at now in Brut can still have sugar. And there's a range. So if you see that range, with Brut, it can be between 6 and 12 grams.
In a blind tasting, so a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
No, this is why I think these data sheets mean a lot, because this will tell you pretty much anything and everything you want to know. The first champagne we're having, I think, tells you this on the back, what the grams per liter they've added. Extra dry is 12 to 17, sec is 17 to 32, demi-sec 32 to 50, and then dough, which is sweet, more than 50 grams of sugar per liter. Now that term demi-sec, we do carry Veuve Clicquot demi-sec champagne on the shelf. 32 to 50 grams of sugar compared to the brut level, that's a noticeable level of sugar. So when you taste that champagne, a demi-sec, you should be able to taste the sweetness. So I'm just saying there's fine lines between each one of those, and if you can detect that, that'd be great. But that's why we only have certain categories out there on the shelf, and brut is, I think it kind of fits the bill for most people's palates.
And the last classification, Doug, that's going to be a rarity. These
a
days.
Rarity, sweet dessert champagne. Never seen it in my career. So let's get to our final step. Now that we determined the final sweetness of the wine, we've topped it off. We now know exactly the style of wine. Now we want to add a cork, a cap, and a wire cage. And so immediately after that dosage, after determining that sweetness, we want to squeeze a cork into the neck of the bottle. Squeeze a cork because if you ever, when you open these bottles, the cork comes out shaped as a mushroom, but that cork is actually a big round cork that they compress and then shove down in that bottle. So it's shoved in or squeezed into the neck of the bottle, covered with protective metal cap. Most have their brand or whatever on that metal cap, and then all held in place with the wire muzzle, all attaching to the glass so it doesn't release. Remember, cork is made of wood. It is a porous thing and still will exchange with the outside air. This wine will continue to age and mature. Cork, the champagne cork is made of different things. If you look at your champagne cork, it's actually compressed cork granules at the top. And then there are 2 slices of natural cork at the bottom in contact with the wine that's known as the mirror. And that's usually where the name of the champagne, the appellation, vintage, that's where they print all that good stuff inside the cork and inside the bottle. Labeling, we know the label. It's pretty much, it's simple stuff, but they are required to put on the label the word champagne. The wine defined by residual sugar content, meaning the style. Is it a brut? Is it extra dry? Is it demi-sec? They have to tell us that. And again, if you know these numbers, guys, you'll know really how that translates. Vintage year, if it's appropriate, meaning is it a vintage wine? If it's not, it'll just be it just says non-vintage. Whether it's the type of cuvee, it's a Blanc de Blanc, a Rosé, or Blanc de Noir. Speaking of which, I don't have a Rosé yet. Would you mind doing the honors on that one, sir?
Oh, sure.
So we're going to have a rosé here shortly. Hopefully everyone else is. They have to give you the alcohol by volume, bottle capacity, and what that means is, of course, the size, the liter, centiliter, or milliliter. That's all standard stuff. Name of the producer. They have to give you the commune, even where the producer is registered, the country of origin. They have to give you the registration and code number issued by the CIVC. Yes, each one of our bottles here today has a registration number and code on it. And those codes are all preceded by these initials, NM, RM, or CM. Each one of your bottles, you have to look close. You might need a magnifying glass, but that information's on there. And of course, allergen content. Does it contain sulfites? You better believe it does. Here's your champagne label sheet. I think this is in that booklet as well to help read through the label. Just to go through this real quick, we just did cover the levels from brut nature down to sweet or dough. But here's something I wanted to mention. I was just talking about on each bottle. Each one of these will be identified. Each one of our bottles today are slightly different. One comes from a grower producer, the other comes from a merchant producer, and the other comes from a cooperative. And I have them notated there as such. Now, with that, let's see, the RM translates to a grower who makes and markets own label champagne from grapes exclusively sourced from his or own vineyards. So the first wine we had was an RM. The second wine is a CM, and that's a cooperative wine co-op that markets champagne made on the co-op premises from members' grapes. And we're going to talk about that. Yeah, out there. And then, of course, the last one, the Ruinart, is NM. That's negociant. That's a grower who makes and markets own label champagne from grapes exclusively sourced. No, that wasn't the same. I wanted the NM. There we go. Merchant producer. Yeah, that's at the very top here, where they're buying the grapes. Ruinart buys their grapes. And then makes their wine. Again, what I'm trying to point out here, when you buy champagne, every champagne will be identified and tell you what kind of a grower or producer made the wine. All right. And keeping going here, they have to tell you the vintage, Blanc de Blanc, whether it's a white wine, Blanc de Noir made from, and we did cover that. This is all good label stuff. Now to go over our wine. Now we're finally getting to, this is why we want to taste these wines ahead of time. The first wine that was on our list was the Bertrand de l'Espalier. This is our grower champagne. Didier Bertrand and Chantal de l'Espalier, two producers. They are grower producers. They only farm 24 acres of this wine, primarily Montagne de Reims, and it's in the heart of Champagne. You have the data sheets out there. And as we just talked about, the RM on there, RM refers to the grower champagne. And I would like for people to start looking for that designation on champagnes, simply because it means, I want to say, more quality, more attention can go into it. They're becoming way more popular than your big names. So when you see no name champagne out there, it doesn't all mean bad. You just got to be cautious and know how to read it. Here's the data sheet on the wine. We did send that out if you need to have all the fine details on it. And everything we discussed here today, pretty much from the vineyards. You know, if you look at the data sheet, it tells you the grape variety breakdown in this wine, it tells you that it's what is it? Merchant Manipulant? No, RM. That's an RM. Yeah, I need my glasses.
You and me
Yeah,
both.
yeah. But it'll give you all the information, pretty much everything we just discussed. If you can zero in on that, it'll give it to you. So now, and we've already tasted this, but it says lemony citrus on the nose. It was pretty simple, toasty, subtle. And when it comes to serving these wines, should we talk about what goes with champagne? Everything, everything. Okay, still letting people in.
Yeah.
All right. So that was our first wine we had, which pretty much was a blend of different vineyards. Our second wine that we had, Les Menil, is a Blanc de Blanc, 100% Chardonnay. It was from a Grand Cru vineyard. What makes the second wine special is that it comes from a Grand Cru vineyard. But how did we get it for $39.99 a bottle? Well, it's because the plots we got from that Grand Cru vineyard probably weren't the very best. Were probably the leftovers, because the primary plots in that vineyard go to brands like Salon, go to Krug. And anyone who knows Salon and Krug, you're going to pay $400 a bottle for the same vineyard that we just spent $40 for. So understand, depending on the producer and the plot of ground that it's coming from within that Grand Cru, even it could be more prestigious. Again, what we're getting here for in this Blanc de Blanc for $40, I'm going to say is not the best of the plots. Just a picture of the vineyard. Now, the primary vineyard in the town you can see down in the heart, but please look around on the outside of the village there. Those are all vineyards, and I would suspect are less than, if you will. Les Menil-sur-Auger. This is the name of the town. The Les Menil-sur-Auger. The name of the town here in the appellation. It's known for these vineyards. 100% Grand Cru, east facing. Topsoil is over a layer of chalk. Again, excellent water retention. If you want minerality in a wine, it should come from the Côte de Blanc in Champagne, and again, 100% Chardonnay, what we have here. And I can't stress enough, it's those big names, Krug and Salon, that pretty much have made this vineyard famous. I want to go back just real quick. If you look at the front of those labels, see our wine here today has Les Menil on the label because it was made from a co-op, here, a cooperative, who pretty much got all the leftovers of the plots and put one big wine together, okay? But then you have wines like Salon, you see they have Les Menil in theirs, but then you have Krug off to the side there that has Clos du Menil. Clos is a walled-in vineyard. So Krug actually has a single vineyard here that is inside a wall. Very specific vineyard sites here, guys. So what we're having again is maybe on the generic side of Les Menil. If you want the real stuff, go to Krug and spend $400. Again, I picked these wines for this reason. It gives us a good talking point and an opportunity at $40 to taste this vineyard site. This vineyard, the soil here was once an ancient seabed. Certainly there are fossils, which, and again, it's all subjectable, but imparts minerality and saltiness in the wine. That's the Blanc de Blanc we had. And you're not going to find, I don't think, any more of a link between terroir and taste than you will in a Blanc de Blanc from Champagne because of that chalkiness. Keep saying Les Menil-sur-Auger. It's one of 17 villages that have Grand Cru status, but it's really your big houses, the Krug and the Salon, that own the really prestigious plots within this vineyard site. I'm not going to read the review here. I'm losing my voice. We've all tasted the wine. This is someone else's wine review from California that they gave the Blanc de Blanc 95 points and gave it a classic. Just to move on real quick to the Ruinart. Do I have a glass of Ruinart?
Why, you sure
Oh,
do.
outstanding. Cheers. One more here, guys. Now, I haven't tasted the Ruinart, but what makes this different, as I said, is that it is rosé. They start with a base of Chardonnay here and then splash it up with a good percentage of Pinot Noir. So
Very nice.
there's more fruit there. That's, again, a different animal.
We have a comment.
Go ahead.
Let's see what our comment is. It's from Walt. Thank you for a great presentation. I hope you're not leaving yet.
I think we just lost Walt.
Yeah, I guess it could be.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. There's so much to cover here. We're almost done with this, I do promise. And again, just to talk a little bit about this review, it does rank up there with 95 points, but I don't generally look at points. I like to look at what they say about the wine in the tasting note itself. And again, you could go on and on and on talking about whether perfume fruit and apple and toasted brioche and a hint of toffee and all day long. But bottom line is, do you like the wine? Certainly the Chardonnay, I love it. Now back to Ruinart. Let's get this party started here. The House of Ruinart. This is our last wine. It's a rosé. Since 1729, Ruinart was the first established champagne house. Now, we did talk a lot earlier about Dom Perignon. Dom Perignon had a lot to do with creating technique, but Dom Ruinart actually put it to the test and was the first to put the wine out there on the market. Dom Ruinart wasn't just the first champagne, but was the first rosé champagne. So when we have this rosé, it was important that we taste this wine, being the first winery champagne, and now this rosé, the first rosé. Dates to the 1700s, again, over 250 years ago. This is 45% or 45% of the Chardonnay comes from the Côte de Blanc, where when you see Côte de Blanc in one of them regions, I want you to think Chardonnay. And then the Montagne de Reims, and then 55% of the Pinot Noir comes from Montagne de Reims and the Val de Marne vineyards. All very prestigious vineyards here for Ruinart. They just don't own them. They're purchasing these wines, these grapes. And then 18 to 19% is made into red wine, 20 to 25% reserve wines from the previous 2 years. So keep in mind, it's a blend. Everything is being blended in here for a house style or consistency. Ruinart is known for, even though I pulled the rosé for this tasting, they're actually more known for their Blanc de Blanc, their Chardonnay. But again, this is some good talking points because this has the Chardonnay in it, and they are the first rosé. Pinot Noir vinified as a red wine, and the fullness of Pinot Noir actually helps consolidate the freshness of Pinot Noir, or the Chardonnay. And here's the breakdown of the Ruinart Rosé. You have it out there. If you have the tasting sheet, you have it. And it tells you it's based on a number of Premier Cru vineyards and what the blend is. 45 Chardonnay and 55 Pinot Noir. So we're talking a predominant, even though this is a rosé, has a good base of Chardonnay, has a lot of Pinot Noir in it. So yeah, more fruity. Just a different flavor profile completely, and more of, I want to say, the red berries certainly noticeable there. Dom Ruinart, Terry Ruinart, lived 1657 to 1709. Again, later Dom Ruinart, just like Dom Perignon, these were Benedictine monks. Benedictine monks very much involved in the winemaking at this point, with the church and with a royalty. Dom Ruinart actually met Dom Perignon, he took all his lessons, his tutelage was under Dom Perignon. Dom Perignon taught Dom Ruinart the art of champagnization. I love that word. I don't even know if it's a real word. Yeah, taught him the art of making these sparkling wines, or introduced it to him. It was Dom Ruinart that actually, though, the company that elevated it and promoted it. Dom Ruinart, or House of Ruinart, was founded September 1st, 1729, by Nicholas Ruinart. And Nicholas was the nephew of Dom Terry Ruinart. So I know it's a long story, but it was the nephew that actually took what the Dom learned and then promoted it, and what we see in the bottle today. I like to give Ruinart some credit out there, because we hear a lot about Dom Perignon and Moet and Chandon, but we rarely or don't see some of these other houses that, again, had significance in creating these champagnes.
And there's a lot to be said for lasting for 300 years.
It should be. It should be. Should be. And you know, here's the tasting notes right off of the sheet. I'm not going to go through and read the tasting notes. This wine did get 90 points from Wine Enthusiast. Just be cautious when you see something like this, guys, it gets a point score. Just be cautious when it was reviewed. This review, you can't see the date, was actually about a year ago. I think the beginning of December of 20. So whether this review applies to this exact wine or not, I don't know. You just got to be cautious depending on when it was released. Now, this one I love because this is a Pennsylvania State Store price list, guys, from 1935. Look what Dom Ruinart went for back in 1935. Jay, man. I don't know if you can see it there, but that's for the Blanc de Blanc, the Brut. We have the Rosé. But yeah, $5 a bottle? Really? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's real stuff. Yeah, we in Pennsylvania, we actually had real champagne. Well, if you look there, we had the Dom Ruinart Brut 1923 vintage. 1923, that was the year my dad was born. Half bottle for $2.80. Man, I wish I had that just in my collection. So anyway,
the bottle or the 280.
Anyway, we're almost at the end here, and I want to point out something, guys. There's a big company out there in the champagne world. It's called Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton, or Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. Moet Hennessy is your big champagne house. Louis Vuitton bought and they incorporated many different brands under that headline, but the champagne houses all under LVMH are Moet and Chandon, which of course under that umbrella falls Dom Perignon, but also Veuve Clicquot, the big prestigious name of Krug, and also the one wine we're having today, Ruinart, are all marketed by a pretty much a huge company. If you want to know more information, this book right here about champagne, it's right now, I think, on Amazon at about $40 a bottle. It's the most comprehensive book. It even comes with a tray of maps. It is the most comprehensive book on champagne I've ever seen. It's a wonderful book. Two more I got to mention, a book called Wine and War. If you want to know how the Champagne region, how they dealt with these different wars, Wine and War helps with that. But more importantly, they went on to write the book on champagne and how the champagne sellers then dealt with that. You know how this works. I put together these presentations based on, these are real sites, real people trying to market their wines. Please visit these resources if you can, if you get a chance. If I don't get a chance to see you, this is it for me, guys, for this year. Hope you have a happy holiday, and hope you got a lot out of this. And I guess that's it. I'm going to go taste some wine now.
Well,
turn this over to
we
Marty.
still have and thank you, Joe. We still have an open chat session to follow.
I'm not going anywhere.
So if you have any questions, stick around. I just want to mention.
I want to hear from you.
Absolutely, because again, this is our last go round until next year. And I do want to say real quick that if you want to know more about the Pennsylvania Wine Society or view any of our past presentations, go to the pawinesociety.org website, and you can find out more about us, including membership options, and you can sign up for our newsletter. If you have any other questions, always feel free to contact me. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Wine Society, and my email address is marty@bcme.net. We do have a couple of let me see, comments here that people have left. And oh, by the way, you can feel free to unmute your
Please do.
unmute your microphone and talk with Joe
Let's talk, guys.
while I fat finger my way through the chat and try to figure out. Okay, so Jerry mentions Merry Christmas. Same to you, Jerry. And
Ooh, smoked salmon. I got smoked salmon.
Kim says this was a super presentation. Thank you, Joe and Marty. Kevin Ostrowski. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Merry Christmas to you too, Joe or Kevin. And again, anybody feel free to open your mic and ask questions or make comments.
Hello, everyone.
Which one did you like? You like the Blanc de Blanc the best, right?
Blanc de Blanc, yeah.
I would say my second would be this rosé.
Yeah.
I second that Wine and War book, a great book about how the French conned the Germans during World War II. In a matter of a couple of days, filled up miles and miles of champagne caves in Champagne, and the Germans invaded, and they were stealing and taking everything they could.
Oh, yeah.
Millions of bottles sat there for 4 or 5 years, and they put the business back on track in 5 years. You want a great book on wine,
Right.
Wine and War.
Right.
I'll second that. I've read the book and it's really terrific. Yes. Another comment here.
Did you guys have any of these wines? Did anyone else have the 3 wines? Uh-oh. Laura's saying no.
No.
What's up, Laura? You can't get any of these down there?
Yeah. Last 2 weeks ago, she caught everything.
Yeah, you can get all them other.
Yeah, we have different brands here, but we have all the vermouth and fortified aromatized wines you could ever want. But what we have is good, so I was happy and it applied. I got wines from the regions, or they were close.
Okay. Well, and again, the whole point of this presentation was to emphasize, because I can't emphasize enough Champagne as a region, because there are many different sparkling wines out there, and only Champagne can do this. And I love it. I just love it. I could just drink this all day long. So,
okay.
We have the 3 wines here, and we're very happy.
yeah. Who could that be?
You outdid yourself, Joe. This has been one of the best presentations, and the wines are just great.
There you go. Let me see. Kevin Ostrowski mentions that Costco Kirkland brand is designated MA and is quite delicious.
There you go. There you go.
Costco, Kirkland. Oh, come on.
That's what he says.
It's only $20 a bottle. It's very delicious. It's a great price point.
Yeah, and
I second that. The Costco champagne is quite good for the price.
Huh.
So Laura and Kevin, so what is it? Is it yeasty, or how would you describe it?
Repeat the question.
The Costco, how would you describe it? Is it yeasty, or is it newer, or
It's a brewed champagne, so it's relatively dry. It's going to be, of course, very light body, a lot of citrus fruits. It's not going to be tremendously yeasty because it's most likely got minimum lees aging on it. Nonetheless, it's champagnes go. It's a very, very nice selection for the price point.
Thank you.
Where did you go to get it? Across the Ohio border?
Well, yeah, I mean, my daughter lives in Orlando. We've gotten it there, and you can also find it in I believe some of the Costco stores in Ohio carry it as well. We don't live too far from the Ohio border. I think Total Wine not Total Wine, but I'm thinking of Delaware and New Jersey would most likely carry it as well.
Someone mentioned the rosé was not available in their area. We actually had to get the half bottle of the rosé because the full bottle was not available.
Yeah, when we put this information out, originally we put out the 750, the full bottle, and then didn't realize that there were some 375s out there, same wine. So, and a little bit cheaper, I mean, for our tasting, so.
Do we have any comments from the IEEE group out there? Or anybody, I'm looking for anybody from perhaps California. We were expecting perhaps a couple people from Orange County Wine Society. Perhaps not.
Kevin?
All right. I'm from Ohio, and I tried to find these champagnes. I went into a couple of liquor stores or wine stores, and they didn't have them. So I just had to come home and pull one of mine. I'm an amateur winemaker, and I make sparkling wine. My
Amen.
wife loves it. So
Okay.
we had a Chardonnay Vidal blend, but we really enjoyed the presentation. I really wanted to have one of the three that you had. Couldn't find it in Ohio.
Not the end of the world. I mean, I picked these three so that we would have three distinctly different wines. I mean, from the blends that were used here, to who made the wines here, pretty much everything. So when we're trying to show an entire area with three wines is really, really hard. It's really hard. And I know there's a lot we didn't cover, a lot we missed out on. But I think these three wines also, in all fairness, represent Champagne as a whole, the category, for talking points and for price points. I can't, like Kevin pointed out from Koski at $20, man, can't touch that. But even these, like I said, at $39.99 in the relative price of Champagne, that's not too expensive. I mean, most of your generic wines, I say generic, Moet and Chandons, are easily, running $40 a bottle anymore.
Okay, got a question.
Yeah.
The difference between Moet Chandon and Chandon Cellars in California, same management team, same grapes, same production process. What's the difference? $40 a bottle.
Same grapes. Are they?
Wow, they're Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, not
Are
grown
they?
in the same
Okay.
place,
Okay.
but they're both drinkable wines,
Yeah.
and there's about a $40 bottle difference.
Yeah.
It's all your taste.
Yeah. And you're right. Yeah, you're right. Is I have had those varieties from Chandon, California, because they actually make those in table wine out there, that you can actually try Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and then of course taste the blended wine, the sparkling wine they make, which is pretty cool. But still, I still am a big believer you can't duplicate everything. You can grow the same grapes, but it's not the same soil. So there's going to be something that's not going to be the same. You see what I'm saying? They can try, but it's not all. And it's great to see these champagne houses doing, I say, the right thing, because it's those champagne houses. They're not calling those sparkling wines in California champagne. They're calling them sparkling wines, as they should. So it's those champagne houses actually setting up out there that are pretty much giving real respect to Champagne. It's the Andres and the J. Rogers and all them out there, the Corbels. They just need to take California Champagne off that label, because it's just not fair. I mean, it's clouding it's muddying the water. So
The bottom line is that terroir is all of the non-man-made factors that go into influencing the growth of the grape.
That's it.
And you're just not going to have two places that are identical.
place. I'm going to drink this half bottle.
And it is
man.
all
This
about
done.
place.
It's done.
Finish it up, Joe.
It's done.
Uh-oh.
Hey, there's pink champagne in here too if you want.
I know, we didn't get any.
I know
Uh-oh.
that. That's because you haven't. And if you keep waiting, you won't get any.
There are, we are,
Merry Christmas, everyone.
we're talking to some people in the kitchen, specifically Joe's wife,
People in the kitchen.
Yeah.
specifically Mrs. Villa.
Sounds like a
Here-
horror novel.
Here they come. Here they come from my rosé.
There you go. Now you know the secret. The
Hey,
woman
it's,
behind the
It's
curtain.
it's all real. So
There it is.
So is the best glass the one that's closed, like tapered towards the top to save the bubbles?
I would have to say only because well, first of all, it's a matter of aesthetics, because then you can really watch. I think I mentioned the perlage earlier. You watch the tiny bubbles as they rise up in a straight line. And it just, as I said, aesthetic. It's just pretty to watch.
Could I mention one thing to everyone here? And, in this process, we mentioned disgorgement, when they remove that sediment plug out of the wine. Let me just say this, when a wine is released, we want to know that disgorgement date. We want to know when it was produced. Be cautious, because when these wines are made, many of them are non-vintage. And I stress Pennsylvania state store shelves, that they can have wines. Some of these sparkling wines could have been bought back in 2012 and standing there on those shelves all those years. How would you know if it's a recent release or if it's been standing there since 2012? Well, that disgorgement date will tell you that. And if it's a reputable producer, like our first wine we had here today, tells you right on the back of the bottle, I think it was disgorged in 2018. So it'll tell you when it was disgorged to give you that idea of when it was released and put out there for market. I just want to stress that champagnes, real champagnes, are going to give you all this information on the bottle if you kind of know what it means and how to read it. Just be cautious, because again, those non-vintage champagnes on these Pennsylvania shelves, I know I've been burnt, because I bought some of these discounted wines, these champagnes, and they come out flat. You shouldn't need a corkscrew to open a champagne, guys. Okay. And that is a bad sign, so, and I've had some bad experiences. Just be cautious on, again, these non-vintage wines, how long they may have been standing there. Another example, there is one on Pennsylvania stores shelves right now, and on the specialty wine store shelves, is a half bottle of rosé champagne. It looks really pretty. It looks great, like vibrant pink, but it was disgorged, I think, back in, like I said, 2013, 2012. So it may not have the sparkle. It may be less than fresh, is what I'm saying. So just be cautious out there.
They typically ship within about 90 days of. I believe that.
What was all that?
It's good to see you.
Hey, for people that don't live in Pennsylvania, Total Wine has 30% off of French champagne right now.
Yeah,
Go get it.
yeah.
Yeah, get yourself a coupon, ask at the front desk, or go on your app and see if they have that.
Or why don't you just be our runner?
Well, same thing, guys. Even though Total Wine's doing that, just be cautious, because this is a great opportunity for them to dump and unload.
You ready to move the mouse?
Yeah.
If you don't know that disgorgement date, if you don't know when the wine was made. So
Move the mouse.
So Joe, the disgorgement dates,
yes,
how long? So what should that be?
it's all subjectable. I don't know how to answer that, because these non-vintage wines don't give us a vintage date. So we really don't know, how old the wine is. So disgorgement is really all we have to go by. And I don't know what to tell you there. Just like any other wine, though, I don't know that I would trust it standing up for over 10 years. You know what I mean? And our liquor store shelves in Pennsylvania, everything stands up. And if it's been standing there for 10 years, there was a brand of champagne I bought, I know it was 6 months ago, called Drapier, Drappier, bright yellow label, reputable champagne producer. And again, I almost needed a corkscrew to get the cork out. It had died. And then what I did is I broke my own cardinal rule. I didn't look at that disgorgement date. And when I rolled it around, I was like, I almost wanted to cry, because I broke my own cardinal rule. I didn't look at how old it was. It's a chance you take. And I don't know what to tell you. There's no 100%. But again, the older it is, like our first wine we had today was disgorged 2018. Even that might be starting to press. It's subjectable, might be pressing, how long that freshness is. I want it pretty much I want the wine as recent as soon as they disgorge, I want the wine. Many champagne houses, I think, are delivering based on orders. They will only disgorge wines based on orders, if that makes sense, because they don't want those wines going out to a warehouse and just sitting there and dying.
Although I will tell you this right now, with all of the problems with the supply chain, anything sparkling that we have or
It's
had
going to be old.
is going to be sold.
It's going to be sold. It's going to be old and
Because
sold. Okay.
we're going to be starting fresh
Yeah.
after the first of the year.
Just be cautious, because I know it's a mixed market out there, guys, of, given this COVID thing of, we can't get this, can't get that. And then all of a sudden they have it. It scares me, because some of these warehouses, some of these wines have been sitting out there in warehouses. And then they discover, oh, we have 500 cases. And guess who gets it? Pennsylvania. So just be cautious.
At the same time, if you find something that got buried accidentally in your cellar, don't be afraid of it, because I actually enjoy older champagnes.
Sounds like an archaeological find.
Yes, we actually did an older champagne tasting about a decade ago. One of our friends inherited an older cellar, and there were lots of old champagnes there. And we said, okay, we're just going to suck it up and give it a try.
Oh, that's a terrible thing you had to do there, Lynn.
Yeah. And, there really was only one that I recall that we poured out as disappointing. They changed their character. They're a little less bubbly. They're richer in flavor. Of course, they're more amber in color. But I wouldn't just pour it out if you find an archaeological find in your cellar, but try it. And Bill wanted to give a third recommendation for the War and Wine book, but he's shy, as you know, so I'm saying that for him.
Right. No, it is an excellent book.
I just ordered it because I'm interested in the history and the wine. So
Good. Outstanding.
Okay. Anybody else before we wrap it up?
I just want to say thank you for all of the videos and discussions throughout the year. It's been really a nice gift, and Merry Christmas to everyone.
And Merry Christmas to you and everyone else.
Yeah, same to you, Laura. Thank you. Yeah, this will be the last time I see you guys. I won't be on. I'm not scheduled for anything anymore.
Well, actually, yeah, for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe April.
I'm gonna just take a little hiatus.
woohoo!
And my wife, I get to see my wife again.
Every other Sunday, yeah.
Happy holidays, everybody.
You too, guys.
All right.
See ya.
Good night.